Okay, good morning, everyone, and once again, thank you for joining myself and Mr. Ako online for our online lecture or discussion. We are in week 8 now, and we're on topic 6, which is political instability and foreign policy shifts, changes or shifts in foreign policy. So to discuss further, I now hand over the virtual microphone to our sessional lecturer, Mr. Ako, to take us through the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. Thank you, everyone, for this morning again. We'll get straight into it. Mr. Aguirre has already introduced what we'll be talking about. So let's share.
We're not telling the customers that go down and tell the story. The people who so they take it from the farm to the dryer to the and then drive down to the sea, get it on the road.
Okay, so as you can see from the screen, our conversations for today will be based around political instability and foreign policy shift. Okay, so we'll get stuck into it. As you can see from this photograph, is networking in multilateral diplomacy. So this is a picture from 2020 during the APEC first universal meeting. 2020 APEC was hosted by Malaysia, and this was during the SOM1 meeting, and I'm here taking a photo selfie with Hairil, the SOM chair of Malaysia. But why I decided to do that is because standing and looking is the Indonesian senior official, the US senior official, and I think the Australian senior official. And it's just trying to get the upper hand of saying that you play wet past them, me story one time some chair host na body language too, so me turning backside lo. So just so him legally strong that we are at the same level as them to move around in the multilateral arena. So making use of all opportunities to impress upon the other partners in this multilateral game that you know your way around. So a foreign policy review, was it an act of choice? So when we look at it, PNG's new approach to external relations was to be more than reactive. By 1979, 1980, that foreign policy of universalism was no longer seen as valid, and the understanding now was to look at being selective but active, and this would involve the reorientation of the country's diplomatic efforts towards specific states and organizations chosen on the basis of the utility to Papua New Guinea's economic and political development. The limited material and human resources of the Department of Foreign Affairs could then be concentrated on the creation and development of appropriately advantageous relations in these areas. Okay, so according to McQueen, the foreign policy review didn't represent any clear development of any new efforts on the part of either the political leadership or the national bureaucracy. But still, for the first time since independence, the PNG identity was now coming to the fore as part of its external relations measures. So first among these characteristics concerns was PNG's relationship with its former colonial master, in addition to the use of intergovernmental organizations for the mediation and amplification of national policies, which would shape PNG's external relations into the 1990s. So it was only in the 1960s, when we look going back, it was only in the 1960s when a timetable for independence was hastily drawn up in response to the UN criticism. and was concentrated thought given to the structure of an independent administration and the nature of politics it would pursue. Suddenly, so you look at it, suddenly at a stroke of a pen, the colonial relationship between the colonial master and the colony by 1975 was quickly transformed to one between regional neighbors. And it would be to this relationship that would lead PNG's next prime minister, who was never a member of the pre-independence movement, to shift away and look north. Okay. So the setting, despite its obvious over-optimism, which appeared to ignore the burden of unremitting hardship that many Papua New Guineans face, most of them are still were still reliant on their gardens for daily survival. So such an assessment did form part of the general positive outlook that characterized those years. The problems of Bougainville had apparently abated then for a moment, with no foreknowledge of what was to come in the next decade. And the work to educate and help make prosperous the people of Papua New Guinea was well underway. Certainly, the influx of unemployment and disenchanted young men to the towns and cities was helping to cause a wave of violent crime by the early 1980s. But the government was working to address the issue of social unrest, and there were good reasons to think that Papua New Guinea was on an upward trajectory. I mean, for PNG, by the late 1970s, it had become apparent that the main objectives of the universalism approach was now firmly entrenched and established. The Somare government's review of this policy in 1979 was taken up by the new government of the country's second prime minister, Sir Julius Chen, who announced a new broad framework in parliament in March 1980. You will have to look at Max Rice's 2003 article. The new general approach of selective and active engagement was taken, under which successive governments to date have managed Papua New Guinea's international relations until the Marape government's strategic intent of friends to enemy to none again. So following the promulgation of this new approach, where issues of national development arrangements and interests were to be identified and actively pursued in the international arena, a whole series of foreign policy initiatives followed. So we're looking at the genesis of our foreign policy intents coming up. So these were characterized into the following eras. The period 1980 to 1985 can be seen as a period in which PNG consolidated its existing relations with key neighboring and historically important countries and important multilateral organizations. PNG also assisted Vanuatu to independence in 1980 over the secessionist actions of Mr. Stevens. Important negotiations affecting various aspects of Papua New Guinea's national interests, such as development cooperation, border management arrangements, were also undertaken with our closest neighbors, mainly Australia and Indonesia, and other Melanesian countries. The relative stability of the government, led by Somare since 1972, was an important factor in the belief in a positive future. Okay. So then steps in Se Biolewale as foreign minister. See, by the after the end of by the time the first general elections in 1977 had been completed, Serbia was already an experienced and seasoned traveler. You see, he had attended the COGAM, or Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Sydney that year. And then in 1978, he was in Rome for an ACP EEC meeting in London to discuss a range of matters with the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office and the Department of Trade. And in the middle of the year, he visited China. So you see, our leaders were constantly on the move. Now, returning to the glowing British assessment, his country had every reason to believe that the country's prosperity would continue for some time to come, if by enjoying the benefits of a stable government. But again, you see, not all was as rosy as the British media had forecast and predicted. The same change that allowed Serbia the opportunity to become deputy prime minister demonstrated that all was not quite as stable as per the British assessment. Indeed, while there had been a remarkable stability at the center of the government, with Somare as prime minister, and before that chief minister, there had been more changes than stability in almost every other portfolio responsibility since the formation of the coalition in April 1972. This is before independence. You see. From 1972 up to independence and then into the 1977, the first general elections, teams were already been set up within the leadership. So I would think that Serbia's foreign minister carried on nicely from Albert Maurikiki. After independence, Serbia carried out the responsibility of his portfolio to the letter. And he did so without a game plan, you see, but from instinct, born out of his experiences growing up in the Western province and living off the sea, that would later lay the foundation for his political job as foreign minister when he came on board. And I'm talking about the Torres Strait border negotiations. Okay, so the house on shaky grounds. Now, according to Serbia in his book, which was written by Dr. Jonathan Ritchie, the prime minister himself brought to cabinet the leadership code and asked all the cabinet members to consider it there and there. Now, according to Jonathan Ritchie, Ebia later recalled the difficulties of its introduction. I quote, he said, "I vividly remembered Rabina Maliu, the late Rabbi, the late Tony Siagulu, the late Meke Morata, and the late Charles Lepani. They were the four Sayers, or the group of four, in preparing this leadership code. But they made a political mistake. See, at the time I was in cabinet, they only met with the prime minister and they excluded all the other cabinet members. At the time, I was deputy leader of the Pangu party in parliament and I was not informed. And unfortunately, Sir Julius Chen, the PPP party leader, was also not informed. No one was informed except the prime minister. As such, the disgust by the members of the cabinet when this proposal of the leadership code was tabled. It was a good proposal. So, see, according to Serbia, matters have to be discussed with ministers before bringing them to cabinet for approval. I'm still quoting Serbia. Julius became very angry, and so did I, that we had not been consulted. It looked like a good thing to control corruption at the time. Really, there was no corruption. Maybe those four people had a vision that in this country, the leaders are going to be corrupted in a few years' time. It was a good idea, but the way they presented it, they forgot about the politics involved. It was a coalition government and we should all have been consulted. Consequently, we all said no and you did not consult us. So this is from Jonathan Ritchie's book of 2012. Now, we would understand that the composition of the coalition government was predictably unpredictable. You see, the maneuvering that led to Ebia's promotion had its origin in the dissatisfaction of many of Chen's PPP members about their influence within the coalition. The actions of the opposition United Party also contributed to the instability when it moved the first vote of no confidence in Papua New Guinea's history in August 1978 over the government's intention to introduce the leadership code. The code was an attempt to correct what Somali regarded as a dangerous tendency at work in our society, which, if allowed to continue, will corrupt our policies, subvert our efforts at national development, and set us on the wrong road. From that juncture, said Julius said he would resign. In November 1978, Chen did eventually resign, following the other PPP members into the opposition. On the other hand, the United Party members led by Rafael Doe filled the vacancies in the coalition, which then lived on at least until the next challenge. Chen's departure naturally left an enormous gap of experience and skills in the rank of the coalition, but it did allow, say, Ebia the opportunity to take on his role as deputy prime minister. So the whole affair served to remind all involved and those observing that far from the rosy picture described in the British assessment, the government in Papua New Guinea was an inherently unstable business. So the House was unstable now as everyone in it wanted a fair hearing, consultations, and transparency in all aspects of the way. There was now a mood for change. So the mood for change. The government under appointed Wolfers and his role was to prepare a study of the problems and the achievements of the past 3 years and outline contingencies with which PNG might in future have to deal with, signaling a move away from universalism and somewhat preempting Wolfer's review. The National Executive Council or Cabinet saw top priority to be given to relations with Australia, Indonesia, and Japan, and the relationships with the competing power blocs in the Cold War era of the United States, the Soviet Union, and China were also to receive close scrutiny. Despite an initial flurry of objections about the appointment of Wolfers, who was an Australian, the job of conducting the review gathered momentum over the next few months. Abia, the foreign minister, had stipulated that the views of a wide range of sectors from across Papua New Guinea society should be sought. And so, in the first half of 1979, a robust debate grew over the merits of universalism and its alternative. Cook, Somare, Renagi Lohia, the Vice Chancellor of the University, and Vincent Airy, recalled from his post as High Commissioner in Australia, all joined in the public discussions. And there were several contributions in the newspaper as well. So now we can look at the way foreign policy review happened in 1979, 1980, as against how this particular review in the last 2 years happened. So the comments were all fed into the review, and as Wolfers got on with the task of formulating his recommendations, eventually, but only in 1982, his recommendations were expressed in a foreign policy white paper, which, as expected, encompassed a shift away from universalism towards an approach described as active and selective engagement. Now, while this was happening, there was also the decolonization, UN decolonization efforts around the region. So, going out into the region, Serbia was in the thick of regional engagements, and in one of the occasions, he dismissed the oppositions of the French, New Zealand, and Australian governments on the topic when he said that if independent South Pacific countries have friends to help them achieve this, then it should not be seen as an unfriendly act. He was referring to self-determination. So the move was more obvious in ABS and his government colleagues' approach towards the continuing exercise of decolonization in the Pacific, but also in other areas where colonies still existed. Now, although PNG already had a policy of seeking rapid decolonization of the remaining colonial territories in the Pacific as one of the components of its universalism policy, later in 1978, Abia went further by signaling his intentions to launch a joint move for decolonization with the Pacific Island nations through the UN. France, which administered several territories from Tahiti in the east to New Caledonia in the west, was particularly mentioned in this regard. So the mood against continuing colonialism in the Pacific became more pronounced in the following year. As for example, when Serbia addressed a dinner held in honor of the visiting U.S. Embassy to the UN, the Honorable Andrew Young, it was desirable for more South Pacific states to join the UN, Abia said, but for this to happen, they must all become liberated, become independent and sovereign state, so that they can also add their voice to the UN Assembly. Eventually, a watered-down version of the resolution was passed unanimously by the Forum meeting, one that called for all nations who have people under their control to work together towards achieving independence for those people. Now, regardless of this compromise, uncharacteristically, Abia persisted in its opposition to the continuing presence of colonies in the Pacific, which meant the French territories of New Caledonia and French Polynesia, and determined to press ahead with his plan to put the matter before the UN Decolonization Committee. The man who had in the Torres Strait negotiations and in earlier instances distinguished himself by his willingness to accept compromise was now placing himself in direct opposition to the French government. This issue brought a substantial amount of attention to Abiy over the months that followed, and in September, he repeated his demand for the right to self-government of the inhabitants of the French territories in the Pacific, this time before the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. In a reference to French colonial wars in North Africa and Indochina, he remarked that, quote, the French government had seen elsewhere how denial of such rights can be sustained, end of quote. In October, when in Papeete, the capital of French Polynesia, for the South Pacific Conference, he acquired even more greater prominence when he addressed a public rally of pro-independence activities, snubbing the French and other delegates by being absent from an official function. So he was now dubbed a Red Ragga, or in the ranks of the left-wing Pacific extremists, by some, and the only person to come right out and say what most Pacific leaders would have liked to say by others. ABI emerged as a champion of the rights of his fellow Pacific Island leaders in the Pacific community. Now, giving lustre to his fame or notoriety, the Australian government, in the form of his close friend Ian McPhee, who was by this time a government minister, rebuked him for his action in Papeete. And closer to home, members of the opposition described him as unqualified to be foreign minister, and even the Fidel Castro of the South Pacific. So you can see that they were already name calling among our leaders due to the politics of the time. Now, PNG championing the self-determination. You see, for many years in the Pacific, Serbia was seen as the champion of their rights to self-determination. The rigor in which he was held was expressed most visibly in his election to lead the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific Council of Ministers at its meeting in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia, in February 1980. In this role, he would represent the interests of nearly 60 nations in Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific region in negotiating fair trade and development assistance arrangements with the countries of the European Union, European Economic Committee, EEC, primarily through the provisions of the Lome Convention. But all was not as it seemed. You see, while his initiatives concerning the ending of colonialism in the Pacific had earned him friends in the region, it had also exposed him to attacks from within Papua New Guinea, including over what was seen as his ambivalence towards other colonized people across the border with Indonesia. Worse, the government of which he was so prominent a member had been weakened by the events of 1978, and the first in what was to become a whole series of vote of no confidence, motions, and breaking and reforming of coalitions. So, however, the shifting nature of political allegiance in Papua New Guinea had been demonstrated many times already by 1980. And while the prospects of Pangu losing his power was ever present, there was no reason to suspect that Abia, as a capable and experienced politician with friends across the parliament, would himself be out of government soon. So there remained a more direct threat to Abia, who, like every political leader in Papua New Guinea, was dependent on the votes of his electorate to keep him in parliament. So with the next election approaching in 1982, Abia needed to return to sponsoring the interests of the people of his electorate and the Western province in general. So you see that it's the responsibilities of our leaders since then. When you become a minister, you have to start balancing your ministerial responsibilities with that of your electorate. And if you balance it properly, it will be okay. If you balance it wrongly, then there can be repercussions to it. Eventually, the house tumbles. So Serbia, like all sitting members, faced a real challenge if he wanted to be re-elected in 1982. And this challenge that could only be met by becoming more responsive to the needs and wishes of his electorate. All this came to a crashing halt for him early in 1980. While Libya had been occupied with foreign relations throughout the previous year, the instability at home had continued as the ruling coalition, weakened by the events of the second half of 1978, began to totter and break apart. Abia himself, a player in at least one of the events that further weakened the government in 1979, when he revoked the entry permit of the American academic Ralph Premdas, who had been head of the University of PNG's Political Science Department, and ordered him to leave the country. The resulting appeal led to what was termed the Rooney Affair. This was when the late Nahor Rooney, who had succeeded Abia as Justice Minister, was convicted on a charge of contempt of court over her interference in the Premdas case and sentenced to imprisonment. In September, Somare, who had taken over justice from Rooney, ordered her release from prison, leading to unrest and protests, including the resignation of the Australian Chief Justice and 3 other justices of the Supreme Court. The rising tide of violence, especially in the Highlands, led to a state of emergency being declared in the 5 Highlands provinces in July. And in Port Moresby and the other larger towns, there was student unrest over changes to the National Scholarship Scheme. So a lot was happening. Now, these events caused some to comment that PNG's political system was on the point of collapse. So facing continuing pressure from the opposition and within his own coalition, in January 1980, Prime Minister Somare reshuffled his cabinet, moving 15 of the 23 ministers, sacking 2, including Roy Evara and the United Party's deputy parliamentary leader, and demoting both Momis and Kaputin from the cabinet. About half of the United Party's 15 members walked out of the governing coalition, angry at Evara's dismissal. Kaputin and Momis, incensed over their dropping from senior ministries, also left the coalition and formed a breakaway party, the Melanesian Alliance. So now we know how the Melanesian Alliance came about. So Serbia's positions of Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade were hotly sought after. Hotly sought after leading up to the reshuffle, and Momis and Kaputin had aspirations in this regard as well. So in the end, however, these two were overlooked, and Abiy retained the deputy prime ministership. But because, as Somare explained, he is deputy leader of the Pango. However, this was hardly a vote of confidence in Abiy's performance and signs of Somare's desperation over the rapidly disintegrating coalition. Abiy did, however, lose his foreign affairs portfolio to Tony Ila, who formerly was the Labour minister and a Pango party member from Lake. So in what must have been seen a demotion, he took over the agriculture ministry. The reshuffle did nothing to quell the unrest about Somare's government. By March, the level of dissatisfaction with the coalition's performance led to another vote of no confidence in his prime ministership. And this time, this vote of no confidence was successful. Yamba Kyoku, moving the motion of no confidence, cited a litany of ills that had beset or been committed by the coalition. And following a vote of 57 to 49, the Pango-led government of Somare, which had held sway for 10 years since being formed in 1972, was defeated. The new government was headed not by Yok, but by Prime Minister Julius Chen, who in charge of the National Alliance coalition comprising the People's Progress Party, the National Party led by Ohuk and Papua Besena, the Melanesian Alliance, the United Party, and one independent member. Abiy was replaced as Deputy Prime Minister by Ohuk, and Noel Levy took over the Foreign Affairs portfolio following Tony Ila's short-lived tenure of less than 2 months. So these are the references of what we've just had a conversation on the political instability and foreign policy shift that contributed to not contributed, but that was part and parcel of our foreign policy review, and which also resulted in the foreign policy white paper of 1982 of active and selective engagement. So I'll stop sharing the screen there, Mr. Ego, and hand the virtual mic back to you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. Thank you for sharing with us your insight. I'm sure the students have learned a lot and taken note of what you've shared with us. We'll go straight to our first attendee, Jerome. Jerome has questions and comments for you. So, Jerome, please go ahead.
Yes, questions and comment from previous discussion on private sector's influence in our policy. So I'll move on to my question. First is, how can the PNG government ensure that the private sector's influence on foreign policy aligns with the country's development priorities and the national interest? And my second question is, what mechanisms can be put in place to enhance transparency and accountability in the private sector's engagement with the foreign policy decision-making process in PNG? Thank you. You can answer that. I'll move to my comments and the other questions.
So please repeat the first question again.
My question is, can the PNG government ensure that the private sector's influence on foreign policy aligns with the country's development priorities and the national interest?
Okay, yeah. So how can I get it from your question that it's about how can the PNG government regulate private sector's involvement in foreign policy making?
Yes.
Okay. It really cannot regulate it. Well, it can regulate through the policies we set up, policies in terms of like the SME policy and the MSME policies, the uh, Investment Act, all those other policies, laws and regulations which the country has in managing its international relations affairs. As we all know, the private sectors in a democratic system like ours are all free to do whatever they want within the laws of the country. And the only way to regulate it, or let's use the word to align, the only way to align is to have regular consultations so that the private sector can talk about its issues and the government trying to match them, because as we all know, the private sector is the engine of growth. Private sector, if you regulate it too much and make it stop, then government won't have any revenue making machinery through its taxes to make more money for the country. And the second question?
Okay.
Could you repeat the second question again? Sorry, Jerome.
Yes, yes. The second question is, what mechanisms can be put in place to enhance the transparency and accountability in private sector's engagement with foreign policy decision-making process in PNG?
So those mechanisms, from my point of view, will go back to the foreign policy white paper. Now, in the white paper, I'm sure let's say the white paper. Let's use a make-believe white paper. So this white paper has three main pillars, and one of the pillars would be on good governance, maybe. So under those pillars in good governance, what will be the strategies which we will have? Maybe we will have one of the strategies we might have. Regular dialogue with the private sector. So under that regular dialogue strategy, what other objectives can we come up with under that regular dialogue strategy? So under regular dialogue, we might have something like, let me go back to the way the Business Council has instituted its dialogue sessions with government. So it's the other way around now. So the Business Council has taken on the initiative to have its private government connect series of conferences. And then below that, you have, it also has the government to business consultative forums. So those are where dialogue to regulations can happen. So the private sector comes up with its issues, saying that this act has been not been policed properly by government, because we are under this law, but we don't have a proper security in place. Now we getting robbed most of the time. Through the Highlands Highway, let's use the Highlands Highway as an example. People stop block roads, get some tax along the way. All those things are inhibited or add additional cost to the private sector revenue lines, profit lines. So that's the only way it can, because if we look at the pure regulation, full on regulation, then the other arms will not work now. So once you regulate business, then it hinges on becoming a dictatorship now. So once you start regulating business, investors will not want coming because they know very well it will put in money blue by government by hold him or lock him up. Once you have free enterprise, then you have easy movement in and out of businesses. A seamless trade will happen, and also export import will move seamlessly. Regulating business means that the containers that bring all our imports will also be regulated. And once you regulate them and start putting in more taxes or ensuring that let me put it this, once we start regulating our businesses, and it means regulating the imports also, then it might also increase the turnaround time. But also increase the turnaround time of how fast the imports are taken off out from the containers, how fast the customs companies can process that so that services can go. Because you must understand that as soon as a container come up the lane, or container cars are loading now, carry going to highlands to their suppliers or to the service providers who are waiting for them. So a lot happens in the supply chain as well as the business environment when we start talking about regulated business. So that happens now. Businesses become involved in foreign policy and in international trade when that supply chain is restricted or is threatened by government regulations or other security measures. That's when businesses become involved. If everything is going well according to dialogue, all business goes through the government and they have an understanding that this is happening, the ministers are making money, they're paying their taxes to government, so the government is happy, then nothing should be changed.
Thank you for answering the question. Moving on to my comments regarding the private sector's influence in foreign policy. I think that the private sector's growing influence on PG's foreign policy reflects the increasing importance of economic diplomacy in the country's international relations, with business playing a crucial role in saving trade agreements and investment partnerships. My second comment is uh, the Fiji government needs to strike a balance between promoting public interest and safeguarding national interest, ensuring that foreign policy decisions benefit both business and broader population. So that's my comment. And moving to my two questions on medium-term development plan for as a trend this foreign policy making. So my first question regarding the medium-term development plan is how does medium-term development for specifically influence PG's foreign policy decisions?
Jerome, your voice. Okay, go ahead.
My first question is how does the medium-term development plan for specifically influence PNG's foreign policy decisions? And my second question is what role does the medium development plan for play in saving Fiji's relationship with international partners?
Okay. The first question on the influence of MTDP4 in foreign policy, international relations.
Since yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah. So the MTDP4 has 12 SPAs. So in the 12 SPAs, the international relations pillar, let's say it has 12 pillars, and the pillar in which international relations come under is under pillar 4, under pillar 12. But the MTDP4 talks about, is actually about the MTDP4 is a domestic game plan on how PNG can become prosperous. Now, we all know that no man is an island. So PNG still relies on its international relations and bilateral partners for trade. Now, we mentioned earlier on in your earlier question that the supply chain of export-import ensures that we have all the necessary ingredients we require for our oil, for our other services, and including goods, imported goods that come in. We need those. So the MTDP4 influences that. The MTDP4 is the domestic game plan that talks about how domestically PNG can move itself to be prosperous, and part of one part of that game plan is its international relations efforts with its bilateral partners and development international donors. So that's question number one. Answer question number one. Now, question number two, your voice was breaking up, but I took it as was it part of the same question about how MTDP4 influences international relations, or it was the other way around, how international relations can influence MTDP4? Can you clarify that, please?
It is similar to the structure. Every one of the rules that is in same relationship with the national partners.
I'm sorry, Jerome, your voice is breaking, so I can't understand your question properly.
My second question is in line with the question, but I'm would like to the rules that define PNG's relationship with the international partners.
Aha, okay, yeah. So I'm taking it that your question is asking how is the MTDP4 influencing PNG's relationship with its international partners?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, in last Friday's presentation, you will note that under each of the SPAs, there's a budget. So in those budget, that is the proposed amount of funding that is required to deliver, work towards delivering any particular SPA. So suppose, and then during our talks with our during the government's talks with international partners, if the international partners is saying that we have funding here that can cover that piece of road or that infrastructure you want built, then that's when the government will say, okay, great. So then once in a normal situation, the development partner will come in and cover that aspect of the SPA activities. And then we make tick him off as part of that budget. That's how I understand it. The development partner will not be bringing in any additional budget on top. Let's say if that particular SPA budget, SPA has been budgeted for 40 million, and then the development partner wants to come and do a 5 million KINA infrastructure based on one particular activity in the SPA, then EMBA come to cover him, and then we can tick it off, and now we only require 35 million to look for to cover the rest for the period of time. So that's how the development partners can support the implementation of the MTDP4, according to my understanding.
Thank you. I would like to make a comment regarding MTD. So I think that aligning foreign policy with the TD medium-term development for PNG and ensure that its international relations support the country's long-term development goals, promoting a more strategic and cohesive approach to global investment. That's my comment regarding the medium-term development plan. So with that, thank you. That's the end of my comment and questions.
Thank you very much, Jerome.
Thank
Much
you,
appreciated.
Jerome. And
Thank you.
yes, thank you, Mr. Atwell. We move on to Rafaela.
Thank you, Mr. Yagera. Good morning, Mr. Ako, Mr. Yagera, and everyone else. So I have a couple of questions and comments to make regarding our discussion from last week and from today as well. So I will start off with my comments and follow on with my questions. So my first two comments are relating to what Mr. talked about in terms of what Mr. Ako you talked about in relation to negotiation in our last week's session. So yes. So from my first comment is that from my perspective, I feel that even though this is in relation to negotiation, so I feel that even though the language English is PNG's official language, I feel that the fact that over 800 local languages being spoken across the country, it can create challenges in terms of negotiations. And I think that language differences or misunderstandings, this can easily lead to mistakes or even manipulation. And it has happened, or it has occurred, or I've seen how technical terms can be misinterpreted at times, or subtle, I'd say, cultural cues being missed, which gives off foreign negotiators, it gives them that advantage. And I feel that this is, and it's crucial to focus on clear communication or to use interpreters when needed, or to train our negotiators to explain complex technical and financial terms in terms of negotiations, like to explain it in simple terms so we understand where we stand. And this, in my view, I feel that it can help or prevent being talked over or agreeing to terms without fully understanding the consequences. Now, on to my next discussion that I wanted to share. It is evident that PNG often relies heavily on foreign consultants, lawyers, and technical advisors to manage agreements, and especially in sectors like mining, oil and gas, and large infrastructure projects. And while it is understandable that their expertise is important, I feel that this over-reliance, it can put our negotiators in a what's the term? Passive position, making it harder for them to challenge terms that may not fully benefit our country. And in my view, this dependency sometimes leads to contracts that favor foreign companies with clauses that reduce PNG's revenue share. Now, moving on to my third comment, that's from your discussion that you have just shared with us relating to this topic, based on PNG's foreign policy review. Now, I think that PNG's journey to independence, PNG's journey to independence was a big deal for its foreign policy. And after gaining freedom from colonial rule, PNG got to shape its own foreign policy, focusing on what the country needed. And it's been a challenge for PNG trying to figure out its own identity in the world while balancing relationships with old friends like Australia, and also while trying to make new connections. And I think that this is the main challenge here, that PNG is trying to maintain our old connections while trying to make new connections. And moving forward, the heart of PNG's foreign policy should focus on what's best for the country. And while being mindful of regional and global trends, I think it is important to keep in mind PNG's historical and cultural experiences, because I feel that the strive for a better PNG can best be understood, or can best be taken from understanding how our historical and cultural roots. Yes, that brings me to the end of my comment. Now I'll move into my questions. So from our discussion on foreign policy review in 1979, I have a couple of questions, and my first two questions are related. So I'll just ask both of them at once, and you can respond. So my first question is that from your perspective, Mr. Ako, what was the greatest challenge faced by the government during the 1979 policy review? That's my first question. And my second question is in relation to that again, and that is, what would be one key takeaway from the 1979 foreign policy review? Those are my first two questions.
Thank you, Rafaela, for that. Well, the greatest challenge in 1979, but I think the greatest challenge was the capacity to do the review. From my experience, and I know from my seniors who have been talking about the experience, was that from 1975, for a couple of years, most of our foreign service officers were seconded to Australian missions. They're trying to learn the ropes. They're noting very well that Australia would have had missions in operation for the past 20, 30 years for us to be involved in there. So that would be the greatest challenge of working and being plucked out of school, or being coming straight from graduating straight from school into the PNG Foreign Service. Or most were former KIAPs. Some were health people, some had other degrees, but other unrelated degrees like science degrees, but they came on board to be part of the Foreign Service machinery. And by 1979, you would see that anyone who was serving there would have only had 3-4 years experience as a Foreign Service officer. And most of them were thrown into the deep end to swim, because they had to go serve in Australian missions, and it was sort of like a gradual development, which most of us experienced, went through. I know we went from this level to this level, and by the time we went out on post, we had enough experience to play there. Most of them had to come on board and just go and do it. So they had to be adaptive. They have to be adaptive to the situation. So that was the biggest challenge, being adaptive on how this would be done. The politics of the day, and the leadership was saying that we are 5 years old now. We are 3 to 4 years old now as an independent nation, and we can decide who our friends are. But friends are not made overnight. Good friends are nurtured over years, and that's how a good marriage develops. You play boyfriend, girlfriend, plenty years now. You become used to each other. Your families are aware of your relationship, and you play married. It becomes a normal transition. So when we started coming up with the active and selective engagement, which was a political decision, then our role is the role of the bureaucrat is just to implement it. So with that pool of expertise we had to really put pen into paper to support the Wolfers in pushing it through. Now, the key takeaway was having a homegrown white paper. You see, that was a white paper which those involved back then can proudly say that they were part of it, part of writing it up. Now, this is regardless of whatever rumors you and I are listening that it was made by it was influenced by an Australian, or it was influenced by the Australians, influenced by who and who. The fact of the matter was that Papua New Guineans were there to write it up. So that would be my biggest takeaway. And it also, like I said, turning that negativity around on the positive side, it made those earlier foreign service officers there more savvy about playing in a game, using a plan to play, regardless of how most of our friends were new. Bilateral relations, that bilateral agreements had already been signed and was only 3-4 years old. We were still finding our way around the multilateral organizations, while we were still finding our way around the multilateral organizations. New ones were being talked about, being formed. And you see, you have to balance and learn quickly as you go along. And the smarter ones learned and went along, while the others, the different levels of educational levels, ensured that there were people at all levels to provide advice. So that would be the takeaway from it.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. My next question is in relation to the same topic, but on one of your slides where you talked about the Torres Strait Treaty. Now, my question is, how has the Torres Strait Treaty benefited PNG since its establishment? Because I feel that there may be some form of unequal power balance due to Australia being the stronger state, and that they may have more influence in decision making, which can potentially disadvantage PNG's interest. So I wanted to ask, since the establishment of the treaty, how has it benefited PNG so far?
That's a very, very good question. To this date, the pros and cons of that treaty was, I think, based on who wanted to stay and who wanted to go. And you see, history tells us that the friends across the border at Torres Strait, Teste Island, they wanted to stay in the Australian side. Although skin color, traditionally they were part of that island grouping towards Western Province, but they want to stay there, and it's obvious they want to stay there because they were already aware of the services involved on that side. The medical services, the educational services, the access to funding, business, all that side was more beneficial to them than if they was being part of the Papua New Guinean side. So when you look at it now, you look at the benefit to date. We look at we focus straight into forget the main islands of Papua New Guinea and Australia, but you focus mainly into the Torres Strait grouping. And then you look at the level of economic development on that side, and it's very obvious why people made those decisions that day to stay on that side and to stay on this side. I'll stop my answer there.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. That's easy to understand. So thank you. Moving on to my next question. In our discussion last week on topic 5, Foreign Policy Review 1979, you discussed in your presentation in one of your slides that late Michael Somara's visit to China in the 1970s, it influenced communist movement in PNG, particularly with regards to Bougainville and the Papua Vesana movement. Now, my question is, how exactly did late Somara's visit influence these movements? And would you agree that this visit did influence these movements? Thank you.
Yeah. The late Prime Minister's visit to China did not influence communist movements in Papua New Guinea. No, what actually meant was it influence. It was seen as influencing breakaway movements. It was seen by Indonesia as influencing breakaway movements because when he went to China, we must all understand that during that particular period in the 1970s, you had the Matangaon Association, you had the Bougainville outcry for benefits and stuff because of the mining, and you had the Papua Basin talking about Papua for Papuans. And this was not good according to the Indonesians, because and then when Sam Michael visited China, and he was well received and hosted there, according to the Indonesian, he would be coming back and promoting. It would be seen that if China's involvement, China was becoming more involved in Papua New Guinea affairs, it would affect it would lay more. What's the right word? The OPM would see that as it would influence the OPM to be more ferocious, and thereby destabilizing Indonesia's domestic situation. There's a reason why when he returned, and then during Soeharto's visit to Papua New Guinea around the time, he asked Somare that if you need help, we can help you in solving or curbing any issues concerning freedom movements or what within your own domestic situation like Papua Basin, Bougainville, and the Matangaon Association. Because if those three flames were continued to be lit, or had oil poured onto them so that they could continue be burning, then imagine across the border what the OPM would be doing. And talk all about upside that too, and more walking, so we'll continue doing it. There is support from there. And then when those things happen, people can talk. People from the movements can start talking, and they can start collaborating, and it could make things worse. So even for ourselves too, it was not proper. Although when you look at it, the only the only vocal people, it was only voices, apart from putting words into action, like in Bougainville or like in the East New Britain province around the time when they even went allegedly murdered one of the Kieps by the name of Jackie Manuel during that time. Apart from that, the Papua Basin was just voiced by a lady who was supported by men, and during that time, this was traditional times, and the Papuans did not flock behind the Papua Basin flag. So Somare's visit to China and China's support for the little people was seen by across the border as inflammatory to the domestic situation on that side and on that side. So there was calls by people from across the border to help curb him, or bring things down to normalcy, and we can work on our bilateral relations. There was a lot to balance. If you were the prime minister then, you would say that, okay, now in my house I have three very violently or three volatile kids. Now the neighbors are saying that whatever investments we require as a new country, that can be on hold, because across there too, these three kids also talking with another of their volatile kids in the next house, and they're already sharing ideas, and anything can happen. So if we look at it that way, then we can understand why the prime minister and our leaders had to move towards cabinet or streamlining those situations to ensure that the greater picture of bilateral relations happen between our two countries, PNG and Indonesia. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. On to my last question. That's from today's session. My question is that the Foreign Policy Review 1979, would you say that it was an act of choice, or did the idea of Foreign Policy Review come from external influence?
I would say it was an act of choice. I think that the external influence was saying that Lusim stop and good idea, just keep on working. But when you read between the lines, I don't think there was any external influence in that. When you look at say ABS life history, there was also a call for the decolonization, UN decolonization efforts. And that meant that we couldn't be friends with friends to war with colonizers. So in order for us to be selective, it was better to be selective with independent sovereign nations than be selective with colonized who continue to be under the yoke of their colonizers. So I would say that that came at a time when we wanted to show that Bipla now, and we are adult enough to choose our own friends, and note very well that the OPM, the Vanuatu crisis in 1980 superseded that. You see, the Friends to All Enemy to None, the active but selective engagement foreign policy white paper came into being in 1982. That was 2 years after we had selectively engaged in supporting the political aspirations of our brother Melanesian. So when that happened, you see, it only confirmed to the region and to every one of our bilateral partners that yes, we are right in our being selective. If we were friends to all enemy to none, we would have been friends and would have left it. Okay, something we played, so please go ahead and do it, and we'll look at the outcome later and we'll assist. But no, one thing led to another. There was this PIF meeting up in the Kiribati, and I'll just take up some of your time by telling the story. There was a PIF meeting up in Kiribati, and then commander of the PNG Defense Force, First Commander Brigadier General Ted Diro was about to. That's Saturday. Brigadier General Ted Diro was about to go and play golf. So as he was preparing to load up his car with his golf baggie and stuff, Jacob Lemeki and Warren Dutton fronted up at his residence in Murray Briggs and told him, said, Prime Minister Julius wants you to bring his bag to Kiribati. And he told him, I'm not you are his bag carrier. You carry his bag to Kiribati. I'm not doing it. Now, what happened was that there were 2 planes on the tarmac that day before. So there was a bigla balus bagolo usual commercial run blame. Na liklik balus blokarim PM na delegation blame golo Kiribati. So the people, the any baggage handlers, assuming that Sir Julius and Big Man and Bakalap lo Bikla Balus, or putting baggage blame lo Bikla Balus, na it went to Singapore or Tokyo somewhere. While the legally Kumule go straight up. So the bag came back, and Sir Julius wanted the bag. Name took him to play. Go, took him command. I need him to bring the bag. So when these 2 political persons went and saw the commander said, I'm not your bag carrier. And they said, no, Sir Julius wants you to bring his bag because there is something else he wants to talk to you about. So Diro lose him golf luggage blame. He went, organized his tickets and stuff. We got the bag, and he flew on the Kumul straight to the Kiribati. So over there, he arrived there, and I think the Kiribati had no hotel, so there was an Australian frigate there to provide accommodation to all the leaders. So during that, he went in that night. So 1 flight room, so he allowed his prime minister the bed, and him sleep on the floor. But around 2 a.m. that morning, Walter Lini and Barack Sope came, all come north now. Okay, situation and Molsen. So Mipla need him this last assistance. So there and there, they made a decision the next morning. Said Julius Torarim Diro and Kalapatem Tupla Bosman Blo Vanuatu. They flew straight to Vanuatu. There they went, he briefed them, and he told them that this thing will only happen if there is an intervention, military intervention, to curb that violence. So to cut a long story short, all fly come back. They said Julius got the Governor General said Torre to organize a special parliament sitting, and all these briefings were done, and Parliament approved. And by the time what Parliament was in the process of approving, half of the Kumul force was already down in Vanuatu. They flew down a couple of days earlier as part of the celebration process. Logo celebrating independence of Vanuatu. I think it was on 7th of July, I think, if I can remember correctly, 1980. So they were already down there. So by the time the Parliament gave the decision for the intervention or the peacekeeping people to go down there, half of the people were already down there. So they all flew down. They all flew down on commercial balus, while 2 patrol boats, 1 barge, 2 nomads, 2 DC3s were already down there, including the 2 chaplains from Tarama Barracks and Moem Barracks. I know these stories very well because my father was one of those chaplains who went down to from Moem to Vanuatu. So that's all done, and from the Vanuatu crisis, they came back. They had a talk about how to push things forward as a region, and that's from there the 3 sons of Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea. You had Mr. Someone from Vanuatu, the foreign secretary from the Solomon Islands, and the Secretary Deem himself sat down and said, listen, how can we make this thing work? So from that conversation up in Goroka, the MSG came about a decade later. So when you look at it, the PNGDF intervention in Vanuatu created the MSG. But when you look at it from a foreign policy point of view, the active and selective engagement of actively going down there through a selective process and making, helping Melanesian, brother Melanesian nation become an independent nation, pushed the MSG, created the MSG. So you look at the pluses of that foreign policy is the MSG. MSG came out of that active and selective engagement, but it was preceded with the 1980 thing. The challenge after that was making sure that we played and kept our. Imagine if we had built on from the MSG and from Vanuatu, we would be a big player in the region now. Something which our Fijian colleagues have taken it and they're doing it. You know, you look at Fiji, you know, due to the coups that happened and been kicked out of the PIF, they went one step better. They came up with the alternative to the Pacific Island Forum. They have a development forum, which brings in all the Pacific Islanders, all the development partners to talk development in their country. We had that opportunity in APEC 2018, where we pushed to have a development forum type of thing when Prime Minister O'Neill invited all the Pacific Island leaders to come and see how we hosted APEC. And we pushed it, okay, now let's sign something so that we can, after this, we can have a development China +5, China +6 development forum in the country where we can work on securing the Belt and Road Initiative properly. But as it is, you know, the typical department versus department, it went block. Concentrate on APEC, foreign policy, and work Blomipla. So we keep on missing the boats because of personal differences. You know, we keep on, you know, people don't look at the greater good, they look at the person. So that was the Tumuna story, Blow Dero, which whose story I just completed, and I'm just waiting for it to be released by soon. I'm just waiting for the book to be published soon. But that was how Dero went and got the thing done. He convinced the parliament, he convinced the cabinet that no, because by that when he was convincing the briefing the cabinet, Jimmy Stephen had already taken over the communications, the businesses, the wharves, the NBC blow, Santo. He was already in force, and the Vanuatu leaders were saying, no, we wait until the British and the French leave, and then I think things will come to normal. And said, no, you need to bring in this force. You need to bring in this force, and this force will make sure that those people will leave. So when that happened, you had the diplomats in Canberra and in UK doing the diplomatic dance, while the military option was also in place. So it was pretty smart. When you look at that intervention, it was a very proud moment, and it was Sir Julius Chen's moment of glory in his political career. Because it should also be viewed as our moment of glory, because it showed the world that we can play internationally with proper planning. Remember that plan, the active active and selective engagement foreign policy white paper was already in draft form by 1980. Sir Julius knew it. And it was a trial run. And it worked. That if we play by a plan, we can actually become heavy hitters in the region. And he used the vehicles of the PNG defense. He used the government vehicle to achieve that, and that's what we should be working on. We get a plan, use government vehicle. If it's about trade, then use the trade department, resource it, move it. Or if it's about health, or if it's about agriculture, resource those departments and get players to move them. It will work. It's in history. In our history, it happened. Okay, so that will be the pluses of it. And talking about the sidetracking, digressing from our talk on the communist movements and freedom movements, but that the army had a big say in that. And noting very well that while going back to our bilateral talk between PNG and Indonesia, while this was happening, the army was used to negotiate with the OPM to tell them to back off. There was one instance where Diro had to go up to the border to talk with Seth Runkorem, who was then one of the commanders of the OPM, to back off because intelligence had they had got intelligence that Seth Runkorem was getting ready to assassinate one of the PNG leaders who was going up there for a visit. So Diro had to fly early that morning up to the border and got the people to go and call Seth, and he came and he warned Seth, you walk him all Seth. Nila Bakari mo line come and we will smash all of you for me. You do not do that. You need our sympathies of the Melanesian people to do that. And if you're trying to carry out what? So you see, the army was used, and that was Diro did that without the approval of cabinet. Okay, any engagement with the OPM was always endorsed by cabinet. That's how the foreign ministers would engage with the OPM leadership. But Diro did that, and then he was. There was talk about terminating his contract in the army. Okay, so that would have led rumors came about that if you terminate Diro, then there will be a coup. So those things are public records. It is not hidden stories that we are talking about. Those are public records brought on. So imagine if there was a coup in 1977. How would that have steered Papua New Guinea's foreign policy implementation? If the coup came up, we would have become a military country. Then that active and selective engagement, I don't know, would it really would have happened? Or would we have cancel out the French to enemy to none and do whatever it was support? But it never happened. And according to the old men, those rumors were unfound. All fake story, Emto. Anyway, sorry I've taken up the time with the story to Mona. Please, Rafael.
Thank you, Mr. Ako. It was another insightful and very educational discussion lesson to learn from your whole explanation. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafael and Mr. Ako. We will have Essie as the last person, and then we'll end the session. So Essie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Can you hear me? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Ako, for the presentation today. I just have some questions relating to today's presentation. So my first question is, how can political parties create political instability in the coalition government in the 2025 context? Yeah, that's my first question.
Okay,
I'll let you answer.
I'll answer it first. How can political parties create political instability? Okay. Well, back in 1977, they all had, you see, they all had their ideas of how to run a government. And the coalition, as we can see from the as we experience from our newspaper readings of what in today's situation, our governments are made up of coalitions, and the prime minister has to keep the coalition satisfied with the number of ministries or with appointments, and we would realize that the leadership code kicked off that instability when those group of four went behind the backs of according to Ebia, went behind the backs of all the cabinet members and went straight and to PM and said the leadership code would be a good issue of cabinet. No, you look at the traditional Papua New Guinea, our leaders were very traditional back then, and all mania, they were leaders, and suppose all mangi go behind the back door on him, they regardless of him good idea, cancel him. Because consulting me. So that created political instability because all of those leaders came from different political parties, which made up the coalition or which made up the opposition. So that created some ill feeling. So, they said no to that idea then. So that would be the instability we were referring to.
So, yes, thank you. Okay, so for my second question is, does political party have any influence in like foreign policy, foreign policy decision-making?
Yes, they have influence in foreign policy. When you go back to the 2022, 2022 elections, general election, and I can't recall the address of the website, but if you go into that, I think the Electoral Commission's website, where they portrayed all the parties and their platforms, you will see that the party, one of the parties I can remember is the party which Mr. Richard Maru comes from. He had his foreign policy statements up already. And then if his party had won, had been invited to form government, that foreign policy of that party would have become the foreign policy of the government, or tweaked among the coalition to become something. Now you look at the Pangu's 8-point plan. I think the Pangu's 8-point plan became the part of the constitution, and from that constitution, the French to enemy to none came up to drive our international relations agenda. And when you look at bigger countries like Australia or the US, the Democrats and the Republicans, and foreign policy goal and stuck, it's set in stone and it's there. Once whoever forms government, their foreign policy immediately becomes there. So yes, political parties can form foreign policies. And that is a must for all political parties. You must have a foreign policy. Because if you don't have it, then if you happen to form government, then you are at the mercy of the others to come up with your policies.
Thank you. Just the last two questions. So I'm just going to read both of them. Both. Well, for the first one, you mentioned something about an event that weakened the government in 1975. So I just want to ask, what was that event that weakened the government in 1979? An event that weakened the government in 1979. And my second question is from your opinion. Like, do you think the leadership code help or solve or address like political instability in PNG? Like from your opinion, do you think the leadership code did or does some work in solving addressing like limiting political instability? Thank you.
Okay. I'll put it on the Moodle, that event in 1979 in full. I won't answer it now. Now, I didn't understand the third question properly. The importance of the leadership code in government, did you say?
Yes, from your opinion, do you think the leadership code that were created by these four cells in the past, does it make any difference or does it address political instability like from the time onwards up until now? Was there still political instability present in the government from today. Thank you.
Well, today it affects stability because our government deals internationally now, and you will all realize now that most of the investment criteria, so most companies or nearly all companies around the world have very, very strong ethical rules, and also good governance initiatives that must go into play into the equation when they are doing their investment pitches. So yes, the leadership code is important, and that's been implemented at the moment now. So that's how we'll answer it. Now for that event in 1979, I will have to get back to you, all of you on that, and I'll post it here. Thank you, SC.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you, SC, and thank you, Mr. Ako, again, and thank you very much for your time. We will end here. We are running out of time. We've gone past 11:30, so thank you, everyone, for those of you who attended, and we'll upload the recording of the video on Mr. Ako's channel. So please make sure you bookmark or you join his channel, subscribe to his channel, and you can keep track of the videos as we upload. So thank you, Mr. Ako, and thank you, everyone, and you'll have a pleasant day.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
All right. Good day.